So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to introduce yourselves and basically speak to the work that you've been doing in the EdTech space and your experiences. Just really briefly give us a sense of who you are and what you do and why you care about EdTech.
Yeah, good afternoon. I was saying it's great to be here. EdTech is something I'm really passionate about because I think that's the future for education. So my name is Bunmi Lawson. I'm the CEO, MD of EdFin Microfinance Bank. It's the first specialized education finance bank in Nigeria. We believe also in Africa, actually. So far, what we've done in EdTech, when we started up the bank, we do realize that the education sector requires financial services. But beyond financial services, we felt that there were key areas of support that the education sector needs. One of which is basically technology, but teacher quality, learning tools, and so on. So we sought out what we call value-added service providers, basically EdTech. So we provide loans to EdTech companies as well, but also link them to the schools that we also have given loans to, and we've actually had quite a number of successful partnerships in that way, success stars, and so on. So that's what we do.
Thanks a lot, Bunmi.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kola, and it's a pleasure to be here. I see a few familiar faces in the audience, so I feel very comfortable. My involvement with EdTech is along two lines. As an operator, our company works with mostly public institutions, helping them scale e-learning and do things around collecting fees and also delivering learning virtually. I love EdTech because, EdTech was one of our first big breaks as a company. But beyond that, at EduPlatforms, we also invest in various verticals, including EdTech. We haven't done as many investments as we would like to do in this space, and I think that's part of the conversation we hope to have today. The question on my mind is how might we build, how might folks build more EdTech companies that can truly scale? Most of the scale we've seen in this market has been more public-facing with public institutions, like the ones that we've operated, but we haven't seen a lot of consumer scale. And so I'm really curious to learn what folks are doing in that space. Thank you.
Excellent, Kola. Thank you very much. Gossy, your turn.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name is Gossy, and my name is Gossy, and I'm an entrepreneur in education, EdTech, first, and over the last couple of years, also just beginning to support other entrepreneurs who are doing work in education, technology, and education, traditional education. Over the last 7 years, we started what was considered one of the first universities in Nigeria to actually try to push to have heavy tech or digital education e-learning approach to delivery of learning, and then subsequently now also just similar to Kola, also helping other universities, public universities, use the same technology to actually scale their own on-campus programs online. And I think so far we've had over about 10,000 students who are actually currently learning and getting their degrees online from traditional universities so far. And investing in education, we've invested in about 4 universities and about 2 education technology companies.
Okay, so for the first question, I'm going to throw you guys a bit of a curveball. I was listening to the CEO of Gidi Mobile earlier in today's session, and he made this really, really strong analogy that helped us to understand how EdTech is one of the spaces that it's easiest to make a profit in at the smallest amount of scale. But there is a prevailing assumption that EdTech is one of the smallest, sectors to do stuff in. It's definitely gets compared with fintech a lot. I was looking at a Partech report from 2018. EdTech was 2.8% of the funding that African Technology Ventures had received, which is not that small a number, considering that it was actually more than health tech. So you guys have been in this space for a while investing, and I was wondering if you were able to describe how the size of the opportunity. Can you contextualize that for the audience, considering that you are operating and investing in that space? It's obviously interesting to you. How do you, perceive it?
Okay, let me start. I do feel that the opportunity is very large. If you look at Nigeria, we're currently about 200 million people. By 2050, we're expected to go to 450 million people. We'll be the fifth largest, or is it third largest country in terms of population size. The other thing is, when you look at that population, we are largely youthful. So I say, if you calculate the numbers between now and going to 2050, you need to add 250 million people when you account for deaths and what have you. 250 million people who would grow from now to that 2050, and they all have to pass through an education system. Currently, we are short of teachers. I think the last presenter was saying we need 2.4 million teachers. I don't think we're going to ever have enough teachers. So technology certainly has to take that place, like online learning, self-learning, and so on. So the opportunity is large. I just sort of feel that with EdTech, it hasn't had as much publicity as, like, you would talk about fintech, So, but I think the awareness is growing now. So more people are looking at how do we use technology, what are people doing, how innovative is it. Sometimes, because I'm involved in both fintech and EdTech, when I try to compare the two, fintech is money. It's almost, emotions are out of it. But with education, you're talking about changing a human mind, how they think. So I think it's a bit more difficult even for people to understand and the complexities. But I think awareness is growing, and so more people are interested in the various tools. It's just I feel that EdTech needs to be able to market themselves just like fintech is doing.
Telling a better story. That was certainly a theme that came up in earlier conversations. Kola, what's your perspective?
So I think at the heart of the problem is really market organization. I think the EdTech market is, because, there's two ways folks have sliced and diced EdTech in this space. Gossy and I have had experience in the public partnering with public institutions. And those businesses have done really well. I mean, I can speak for our business. I don't know about yours. And that's because those markets are very organized, right? Distribution is clear. Your market audience is very clear. The challenge with the consumer side of EdTech is the market structures are not as organized. And it makes the process of innovation requiring a little bit more rigor. All around us, all we see is non-consumption, right? I mean, someone was talking earlier about the ratio of out of school children, right? That's classic non-consumption, right? But no one is really dealing with that. And so I think folks have to think about it differently. I'm very excited about what ULesson is looking to do. Even though I'm still not convinced that ULesson would. I think ULesson would be massively successful, by the way, but I don't think ULesson would solve non-consumption in the way we have it today, right? I think it's going for a different market. So I think one of the questions you wanted us to discuss is, what is the stage of maturity of the EdTech market?
Yeah, we're going to get to that point.
I certainly think we're just at ground. If there's anything below ground zero, I think that's where we are.
So is that a good thing or is that a bad thing, in terms of this stage? Do you think that, and this is actually one of the things I wanted to segue into, we've seen quite a few people do interesting things in that space. So take, for instance, the thing that became Mandela today used to be a thing called Fora. And in many ways, I think that there are even parallels between what ULesson and Fora at the time were doing, which was they were going to condense the learning material into physical media that they could then distribute to people, and then people could access that, and then they will gain access to, at the time, what Fora called Ivy League education. And maybe it was too early, which is why they pivoted and, went into something entirely different. And sometimes we have to ask ourselves, that was what, 3-4 years ago, when is the right time for, are we at that place where we're on the cusp of something happening, or, should people be more circumspect?
Okay. I think I'll even just start by just talking about the opportunity in the market. If you look at the population in Nigeria, and even just if you go across the different sectors where we have physical infrastructure isn't built as fast as the population is growing in some places. So you see people moving to a particular side of town, the physical infrastructure to support them isn't built as quickly as possible. So that's why you have congestions, because the roads are not wide enough for the people who are moving there. So very similar in education. Population is growing. Millions and extra millions of people are trying to get into schools. Let's talk about higher education. You take JAM once, you can't go into school with a JAM. Next year you take it again. I think now we're changing the law so you can use the same JAM multiple years. But before, if you don't get in, by no problem of yours, because there's no space for you, you have to take the JAM again. But the thing is, more people are joining you from secondary schools, and the problem is growing. So the opportunity there is that technology can allow you to actually create solutions for people on campus to actually learn easily, and also people who are not going to show up on campus at all. But coming back into the stage of the industry, it works both ways, and you can look at it both ways. So for entrepreneurs, it's actually really good that things are still quite young here, and it's easy for you to look at solutions that are working in other places, and you can bring them home and sort of localize it, customize it to the market, and you make good money, you invest early, and there's growth for you because the market is wide. But for the students and their parents who are actually getting the effect of the lack of education, not so good. That it's taking this long for things to pick up. But again, things are picking up. Infrastructure is getting better. I don't think internet is by a million miles better than it was a few years ago. So in our own case, we've had to put students' materials on a thumb drive because they can't stream videos that are like 500 gigabytes. So we have a nursing program online. The nurses need to watch videos where there are practicals and all of that. You can't use HTML5 videos to do it. It's actually recorded videos, like 2-hour videos. So we've had to put those videos on thumb drives that they have to sign into to watch those videos. You can't take around that because the internet will actually watch it. One that is affordable, and the second one is actually stable, isn't there. So, give or take, I think we're ready for what the infrastructure can support. As the infrastructure gets better, we can support better things. So right now we can talk about e-lesson is coming up because now people have more smartphones. For us, 7 years ago, we don't have as many smartphones, and internet penetration wasn't that great. So as infrastructure gets better, internet access becomes cheaper, we can actually just build more solutions around the infrastructure.
I just want to add that. So you're not going to scale EdTech with USSD. I mean, you're going to do certain things, but in the truest sense of it, and the World Bank released a report yesterday about the state of the Nigerian digital economy, and it was really damning. I mean, outside of Lagos and Abuja, there's no connectivity. There's no connectivity. I mean, you go to major cities and all you have is edge. So we can't scale. It will be difficult for EdTech to truly scale beyond the infrastructure.
I mean, is this the issue that we keep dancing around? We've been dancing around this issue of connectivity into the last mile for years. I don't want to get into that right now. What I do want to get into is that question of the technology. I'm glad that you brought it up, the infrastructure. And you guys run EdTech solutions. You also see a lot of people, EdTech innovators, as a result of the fact that you invest in these businesses. And the question that I wanted to ask next is, what does the innovation look like? We have gone through that era where innovation looked like giving one laptop to a child for free. You package all that information and give it to them, and you will just watch as divinely they became geniuses, or you put it on an iPad. We've seen lots of foreign organizations, local organizations, NGOs, state governments invest massively in that sort of thing. And the question I want to ask is that where we still are, or are you beginning to see interesting applications of technology, taking into consideration the fact that we still have these significant infrastructural deficits to deal with?
I guess for us at Ventures Platform, the lens we have on is what we're looking for innovation in 3 verticals in the EdTech space. The first vertical is access. How are folks innovating around improving access despite everything we've talked about? Despite connectivity, despite the cost of data. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago on one of our engagements, we literally would take a 2-hour course and chop up the videos into 5-minute segments, and we use something just to make it easier for folks to consume from a bandwidth standpoint. There's so much more else that we would do, but there's so much else that can be done around improving access despite the issues that we deal with. Gossy's talked about flash drives. I know Lawson is looking to do SD cards attached to Android phones. So how are you sort of thinking about access? The second thing that we're looking at or looking for is folks that are building what you would call market-creating EdTech innovations that are targeting folks that simply are not consuming education today. So whether it's the out-of-school kids or whether it's the 1 million or so guys that get dropped by JAMB every year, how are you sort of solving for that particularly? And I guess the third bucket, when we think about it, is quality outcomes. So even where you have teachers today, the teachers are barely teachers. I mean, and I hope there are no teachers. I'm not talking to any teachers. I mean, look, we worked with a federal institution, and I'm not going to name the name of this institution, where the teachers were supposed to come into the studio and shoot lectures, right? First, a large chunk of them couldn't prepare their slides. Now, even after we prepared the slides, I hope you're going to have to edit this out. Even after we prepared the slides for them, they couldn't deliver the lecture to the slides. We had to bring teleprompters for the lines.
So we need to educate the educators.
I think you can educate the educators, or you can do what Oluwafemi has done in Kaduna, or you can innovate around sandwiching for the poor quality of the educators. So how do you supplement what kids in secondary schools are getting, or even university students are getting? Because we're not going to re-educate all the teachers overnight. And every year, more kids are going to come into the system.
I mean, Ms. Lawson, what's your perspective? What are you seeing people do to get around this problem? And now we've identified that the problem is even beyond just teaching people. There's also the actual facilitators also have deficiencies.
Yeah, what we sort of look at innovation in 4 areas. One is teachers, helping teachers to teach better. And, the studies that show that once we improve teacher quality, the quality of education goes up. So how do we do that in technology? There are tools already that we see with our partners in India that already lay out the curriculum. It's almost like a facilitator's guide, but it's automated in an app, and it helps you with the lessons, scoring, even evaluation, and even tips to teach and pass information, so that even where you are not a qualified teacher, you are still able to teach in a standardized form that basic learning is done. So that's one key area that we sort of are interested in. The second one is in learning tools. And we are very, very interested in gamification. So using existing things, so your phone, people are betting and doing Nigeria and all of those things. How do they use that for learning? And I really like what Gidi Mobile has done, in terms of how you use gamification to encourage learning. So how do we increase a lot of that? And even like private tutor, things that people can self-learn, to make children want to learn on their own, so that they're not only relying on teachers. Because one of the things I argue about is that in the future, because we can't really predict all that you're going to be faced with, students need to be able to self-learn, to teach themselves. so that it's sort of maybe it's the dream world, reduces the impact of always having a teacher to teach you. So that's something that in terms of the tool we'll be looking at. Then we also look at what we call school management software. One of the things we see is that schools, especially in Nigeria, are not managed properly as a business. Yes, we want to impact education, but most times you find that schools just have only one location. Why don't they have branches or franchise schools? Why are they not managing the schools properly? So school management software that takes away that burden of administration, teacher management, and things like that are also areas that we're interested in. And some of the things we see is where EdTech should collaborate with other areas. So for instance, renewable energy. So when you go to rural areas, one of the infrastructure problems is that there's no electricity. So are you partnering with a solar company that has something that can power 5 computers for 24 hours, things like that, so that people then have access. And using mobile phones, hotspotting, Wi-Fi, how do we make those kind of things work? So those are some of the things that we look at. Then of course, basic school infrastructure. So, some of the things that, yes, we have these fancy ideas that, we want EdTech and, but basic things even in schools today, they don't have. There's no table, chair. Somebody sent me something about a school bag that is convertible into a chair and table when you get into class. So I don't know about whether you call that technology, because we're looking at digital things.
This sounds like technology.
Yeah. So those are the kinds of things that we're also interested in, and I feel that that's innovation. So there's a lot out there. In fact, with our partners, Great Masses Capital, and they've exposed us to what's happening in India. It's amazing what EdTech has been able to do in the EdTech industry in India. And so I just sort of feel collaboration and all of those things would really help.
If anyone of you is thinking of making a bag that converts into a table, it's probably patented or something, so just keep that in mind. But you are hearing some of the things that they are interested in. Keep the questions coming. I can see that you are sending in questions, so that is cool. I'm going to come back to you about investments, especially investment readiness, but I really want to jump over to Gossy real quick and ask him something that he kind of touched on very briefly, but moved on, and he was talking about the infrastructure. It does go beyond infrastructure. There's also a regulatory policy, just like a general climate around, that determines whether it's easy to innovate. And I mean, we've been aware of each other for a while. We've known each other for a while. I know when you started, Beni American, and I think I wrote about it maybe a few times on TechCabal, super early days, and just watching that trajectory has been super inspiring. But a number of things happened on the way, and I was hoping that you might speak to some of that in terms of the challenges that you face and what the landscape looks like today, especially for people who are looking to come into this space. What can they expect to have to overcome?
Okay, before I even get into that, I'll just touch briefly on just innovation. One of the biggest things we check, three things that we check, I check when I'm looking at innovation and EdTech, etc. Access is the first one. Kola talked about it, I will talk about it. The second one is actually quality of learning. He also talked about it. The third one we actually look at is the relevance of learning. So, Andela, as an example, is the relevance today. Because going to school is one thing and learning, but at the end of the day, when you finish, what's the return on the investment? So solutions, technology that actually can connect people who are going to school to jobs at the end of it, or can create some relevance in what they're learning. So as an example, you see a curriculum that we have here, and students are still learning TechCabal, etc. They're not going to use it when they graduate. So if there are solutions that actually can bridge that gap, so that as the student is finishing, they're getting a job, there's a return on investment. Those are some of the things we're looking at. And surprisingly, solutions around infrastructure like buying computers, and I'll tell you why, and it touches on quality. You see a computer science student who has gone through 4 years of computer science learning, but they've never written code, they've never seen a computer, they've written all their code on paper. So again, that could be like innovation. Now, bringing that back into policy, I think I've played so much around the policy environment around higher education for so long. All I can tell you is that the biggest thing is in trying to innovate, find a way to innovate around the existing policy.
because I don't think the policy is changing anytime soon. As much as you can talk about it and hope for it and push for it and pray about it, it's not going to change anytime soon. So it's around how do you innovate around the existing systems. So a really good example is like EduPlatforms or EdTech, where they won't allow you to build an online university, but you can use the distance learning part of a school or the distance learning institute to use that to pilot out online programs. And you wouldn't even call it online programs. They won't even let you call it that. If you have online on it, you can market it, they will find you. You have to call it e-learning programs. Purely that, like nomenclature, e-learning. You can't say online, so you can't say you have online programs. I mean, I should even be here saying this. We have e-learning programs that students can use to learn online, using the internet, but they're not online programs. They're called e-learning programs. So it's on things like that. So being able to come to the table and say, what are the policies that exist? How can we build around them? So there's a policy for distance learning. But the good thing is the policy never said what the mode should be. So the mode can be CDs, it can be sending your books wherever you are, it can be anything, but the good thing is that in this case, you're able to use e-learning as a mode of delivery. So it's just really around taking your time and realizing, looking at what the policy is and innovating around what the policy is, because I don't think that's changing anytime soon.
I mean, one of the whole points of these sessions is, we're trying to figure out how we can get our policymakers, to engage with these conversations. And if back then, what the story was that you couldn't set up an online university without building out a physical campus. And, it just sounds like a rather interesting, requirement, and it doesn't seem that requirement has changed.
Very much better.
So do you, in your interactions with policymakers over the years, are you noticing, are they beginning to care more, or, should we just proceed and attempt to innovate in spite of, because it's really, really difficult to entrepreneur our way around these, barriers?
Yeah, I think both situations, we have to try and work to make sure that the policymakers are up to date with innovation and things that we're introducing. For instance, even schools, for you to get full approval, they still tell you how to build the classroom, what shape it should be, how many square meters and space and things like that. And we've been trying to get policymakers to, just reduce all those requirements because they are not directly impacting learning. But also, I've also argued that if you look at Nigeria as a whole, some of the industries that we see are booming today are those that even government doesn't really intervene, and you suddenly see that they're flourishing, like creative industry and so on. So I think that even in education, we just have to get on with it. In Lagos, for instance, 2/3 of children, even from low-income households, go to private school. That's because public education is inadequate. Of course, people would prefer good quality. They would rather go to a good quality public school. But today, that's not an option, and that's not stopping parents from educating their children. So I think for entrepreneurs we just sort of need to come up with those ideas. We have to make sure that we educate our people, because I just try to imagine that if in future, with the population growth that we're expecting, and all those people are not educated, what kind of Nigeria would it be for you and I to live in? So we just have to do something about education and making sure that majority of Nigerians have access to education, especially low-income families.
I suspect you're preaching to the choir here, but please, you can,
So I think on that conversation is, interestingly, when you meet some of the people who are the policymakers as individuals, they fully understand what you're saying. They fully buy the idea of what you're saying. They know that the problem exists. But the moment people come together as policymakers who have the policy that they're implementing, they implement that policy, right? So you can have individuals who are saying, I know, because as an example, when you're building a university, you still have to go buy typewriters today. And you have to have your list of typewriters, one for each secretary, etc., and you have to check those boxes. But these guys are not using typewriters in their own offices. everybody's using computers, but the policy says you must have this.
Let me tell you a more ridiculous one. So if you're doing a distance learning center, you're required to set up a data center. This is in the age where you've got virtual, cloud services, and you explain it, and they know everything will be on the cloud, but they still have to see the data center. And so I think I've come to understand that the view of the regulator today is that these barriers are a way to do quality control. That the harder you make it for folks to operate in the space, hopefully they'll keep Charlotte out of the space. So I think as folks that are interested, we have to engage the regulators to improve the understanding of what quality means in 2019. It's not by having 500-seater computer lab, data center, and labeling director, assistant director, store. I mean, these are the
Very
requirements
important
today. These are the requirements today. X number of hectares, and that's the conversation that needs to happen.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask one more question, but then we have to take questions from the audience. And I think it's a question that many people are interested in. How do you decide who is ready to, receive investment? What are you looking for in the entrepreneurs and in the venture themselves? What are the things that you are, scrutinizing?
Okay, first of all, I look at the entrepreneur. How passionate are they about education? What have they done in the past? It doesn't even, what about technology they're bringing? They may not have even started, but you just want to see that the person truly understands education, is passionate about it. They have a reason, that connects them to education. So, that's important because that once there's a difficulty, starting up a business, especially in Nigeria, is tough. So that passion takes them through. And I think that passion also makes them, be able to innovate better. So that's the first thing. But also we then look at the traditional things like, what are your managerial skills? Who are the team you've put together? Have you done a market test? How does it add value? And so on and so forth. So those are, traditional things that you look at for in any other business. But for me, one of the things that's so important is really about the entrepreneur, his understanding, or he or she's her understanding, of education and what that product, what value would they add into the marketplace. And of course, you look at the market size, where they targeting. One of the areas that we are particularly interested in is low-cost, affordable education. So, how does it increase access to low-income families? Those are some of the things that we also look at, basically.
I think everything she said, and don't be a jerk.
Very, very important. So for me, it's even just people, the entrepreneur actually really understanding the unit economics of their business. Are you making money from students? Is that where you're making the money from? Is it from the technology licensing? Is it based on users? Is it based on the hours people are streaming? Because when you understand that unit that actually you make money from, then it becomes a question of how many of them do you need to have a business that can sustain itself. So if it's about users, okay, is it 1,000 users? Is it 50 users? Because most people you speak to do not exactly know what that unit economics is going to be that's going to make them the money, because that's how you can actually focus the business and build a business around that. If it's about teachers or schools, because you have some people say, oh, we're signing on schools, but in reality, who's paying? Because you might have one school that has 20,000 students, and that's how you're making money, or you can have 10 schools, and all your 10 schools are giving you 2,000 students, which is a better business. Depending on where you're making your money from. If you're making your money from schools or from students, then you can decide which one is better. So even just seeing people who understand the unit economics of it, and just have, like I said, be nice guys, because you just never really know.
Since this is a very serious panel, let me say one thing. I think particularly for folks building consumer-facing businesses, distribution. We've seen, we've invested in a company in the space, and the biggest challenge has been distribution. So how are you thinking around, acquiring customers? Once you figure out your unit economics, it's a lot easier if you're selling to schools and you have a captive audience. But outside of that, because there's only so many schools, how are you going to distribute?
So doing things that low-cost affordability options, distribution, figuring that out, unit economics. Good thing is that we're recording all of this, so that was entirely a master class. I'm going to take one question now that looks interesting. I'm just going to paraphrase it. If we're below ground zero in the foundation building stage, what are the foundations you as investors think are most critical for the EdTech ecosystem? You have said that we are at the earliest stage and there are things that need to be in place. What are those rails, as it were, you know? And maybe it might be easier if we thought about it this way. If there was one thing that needed to happen right now to turbocharge this space, what would it be?
Connectivity. And unfortunately, it's outside of our control here, right? Or the folks here, but connectivity.
We keep praying.
Not just availability, but making it like they have in China, in India. I mean, in India today, connectivity is almost free, and it's powered that entire EdTech ecosystem.
I mean, this is by a company called Reliance Jio, or was that government-driven?
Reliance Jio has done that as sort of this contribution, but I think also sort of splitting with other businesses.
I was even reading, there's a report where they were ranking the cost of 1 gig of data. India had the cheapest. Nigeria wasn't too bad actually. We were 49 or something out of, no, but it was out of almost 300 countries. So that was, I mean, I know we were more middle. So in terms of cost, the issue in Nigeria in terms of data is actually that it's not widespread. You know, when you go to the GSMA sites, you see the distribution in terms of 4 gig, 2 gig, and what have you. You'll find that it's mainly Lagos, Abuja, Kano, surprisingly. But you know, everywhere else is really scanty, so you can't have reliability on the internet. But one of the things I feel that EdTech should do is that when you're designing your product, it has to be in such a way that it's not too data heavy. So that, you know, how do you design it that it's not too data heavy so that more people can have access?
Did you want to?
I think the biggest thing for me, surprising, is actually power. And that even goes back to infrastructure. You can't have educational technology or technology in the first place if there's no power. How are they going to charge their devices? How are they going to have power to actually have access to these things? The moment you have power, like you see pictures of students in university campuses and they're gathered around a lamppost outside to read for the examinations. You cannot produce graduates that on day one can compete the way you need them to compete that way. Because either they are so fatigued, when they finish, they just want to have a break, or their understanding of how life is and how life should function is completely different. So they're just coming out angry and just everything's so aggressive. You know, that's just true because you're in university, you're supposed to just be calm, innovative space, zen. But you're struggling to have life to read. So for me, power is like one of the biggest things. Once you have power, then you can actually really power the things that we're talking about.
You know, having run a business in university where we were charging people's phones for money, I totally understand. Or, I mean, if you went to university in Nigeria, you probably understand what I'm talking about. You know the cage that you stick your phone in and you pay 20, I don't know how much they pay now, but it used to be 20 naira. Power. It's a no-brainer, but somehow we haven't figured it out. Somebody says, EdFin CEO, how much capital? Literally what they wrote. Give you the person raise up your hand. They want to know if you have dedicated funds for EdTech companies apart from the other traditional recognizable people that you keep close to. Do you have a dedicated package for EdTech specifically?
It's an interesting question. We have funding and we have a portfolio allocation that we sort of, currently we are capitalized to 1 billion naira. We are hoping that over the next 3 years we should be able to grow that significantly. And what we do is allocate the portfolio to schools, EdTech, and so on. Now, so it's not just, if EdTech doesn't come, we will go to schools. If the schools don't come, we'll go to tuition, fees, and create access. So it's not that it's dedicated, but I will tell you that one of the things we want to do is improve education in Nigeria, and we do recognize that EdTech it's critical to be able to do that. And we only started giving out loans in April, and already we've done 2 EdTech companies. They had basically had proof of concept, and now they've been able to sell a lot of their technology to all the schools that we have provided funding to in that short time, over 300 schools. So it's something that we are really keen on, and that we continue to grow. The other opportunity is that one of our largest investors, Grey Matters Capital, actually invest in education worldwide. So in India, they've done significant investment in education technology. One of the things I'm hoping is that if EdTech continues to grow in Nigeria, then that other arm that is a direct capital investor provides equity. It's not even just loans. We only provide loans, not equity. But they provide equity, debt, and all sorts of financing that they would be interested in investing in Nigerian companies as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Now you know. This question I'm going to be directing towards Kola specifically. They are asking, from your personal perspective, what is the definition of a scalable EdTech solution, which I'm guessing doesn't mean lesson teacher that charges 30K per child. So what does scale look like in EdTech?
Well, so, when you think about scalable or scale, you have to think about it in the context of the market in which you operate. And if you think about this market, the majority of folks are low income, bottom of the pyramid. So scalable within the Nigerian context is going to have to be targeted at lower income, bottom of the pyramid communities. And that then takes you into the uncharted waters of no access to perhaps smartphones, right? No access to connectivity. And so the question is, how do you distribute? Now, I'm sure that's why Lawson is launching, for instance, with a SD card attached to a smartphone. But even that, you would have to wonder the extent that can scale. We're seeing a rapid rise in the number of low-cost smartphones, thanks to Transsion and the rest of them. And so I think that trend will continue to enable scalability in that space.
And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining this session. Thank you for